Okay, so I want to show you how to write an introduction. So under the how to, go to the writing category and click on write an introduction. Okay, there's some important information to know about an introduction. What it does, it gives you a brief preview to what you'll learn. So this is much like going to a movie theater and watching a movie preview. You don't want to give away too much information to the reader because then they'll say, well, I already know everything, I don't need to watch the movie, or in your case, read your paper. So you don't want to add so much information that it's going to overwhelm your reader. So you want to add some mystery, you still want to add specific information, but your introduction shouldn't look like a body paragraph. So if you're going to use specific information, I would say probably use maybe like one fact or quote so that you only have one citation tag. Okay? Again, in your introduction, don't put too many facts or information. Now your attention grabber, you want to have an attention grabber. And the attention grabber could be an interesting fact or idea about your topic that's really exciting and you want to hook your reader, get them sucked in. What you want to do is avoid using a question because that's so overused it will actually weaken your writing. So you want to avoid that. You could start off your introduction with a story. So a little bit of a creative write, but make sure to avoid using first and second person, like you, we, I, us, things like that. So you want an attention grabber. Your introduction should be at least 5 sentences long. So at least. So you can build more, it may need more depth. You need to have a thesis statement that is usually towards the end of your introduction, and it needs to have a strong claim. So how you can figure out if it has a strong claim or not is if with your stance it could be argued against. So if you're saying with, say, the money pit on Oak Island, you could say the treasure will never be found and all of the money that was sunk into it was a waste. Or you could say it was a worthwhile effort and someone will soon find the treasure. So either way, you can argue with that. Again, don't use first and second person, and also avoid telling statements like, in my paper I will show, or I will talk about. Again, that's using first person point of view. Even if you said, in my paper the reader will learn, you want to avoid that too because it's a showing or a telling statement, not a showing statement. You just want to go ahead and present your information. This becomes cliche as well, so you want to avoid that. And then our next step, okay, we want to talk more about the thesis statement. So what you really want to ask yourself is, why is my topic significant? Why is it important? How has it impacted people in history? And what are the main ideas I'm going to address in my paper? So you definitely want to mention like key themes or words, but you want to avoid just listing off information. You want to use it in a creative, professional way. So again, the thesis statement is built up by the sentences preceding it. So what you want to do is make sure that your attention grabber ties to your brief, background information that ties to your thesis. So it's like an upside down funnel. You have broad information on the top that all relates to the more specific information that gets narrowed down towards the bottom. So think of an upside down triangle or a funnel. So again, the broad information goes more specific, but it all ties back together. And your thesis specifically shows you what the reader will learn. So let's look at an example. A teenager comes across a clearing with a depression in the earth. One person starts an entire obsession. Millions of dollars have been spent to retrieve whatever lies under the ground. Many theories are held, tons of attempts have been made, and superstitions run wild. But the true identity of what lies beneath the booby traps on Oak Island will never be discovered. Okay, so what I'd like to point out is here's your attention grabber. A teenager comes across the clearing with a depression in the earth, and one person starts an obsession. Okay, now that's a really interesting way to use like a story to start this off. Now the teenager, she left it vague on purpose. That's Daniel McGinnis, who found the money pit in 1795. Now you could add some specific information with that. I would say starting broad is a good idea, but you can definitely come back and use more specific information, such as here where it says Oak Island. Okay, if you don't know what Oak Island is, you're left kind of wondering. So what I would say to this writer, to Alyssa, is that she would want to mention Oak Islands in Canada, give a little bit more specific information. And this is a really good start, but it's a little paragraph. You want to go back and add more depth. It's got a great start, but I would just beef it up just a tiny bit. Now, another thing I want to point out that she did really well in her introduction, or she's going to talk about theories, she's going to talk about attempts, and superstitions. And if you read the rest of her paper, which I don't have listed, but she does talk about theories for a paragraph, attempts people have made, like people who have been searching for the treasure, things like that in their attempts, and then the superstitions on the island. And so she did a really good job of adding these keywords. So when you do that, I would, go back and look at your topics and see how you can integrate those. You don't necessarily always have to list them all together in one place, but she did a good job with that. Okay, so here's another example. A mysterious island shrouded in enigma, with its supposed fortune buried beneath the earth that's been hidden for centuries. This island isn't a fantasy, it's a reality. So here's your attention grabber right up here. So they're talking about a mysterious island, and this is really great. However, look out for using semicolons. Okay, now with semicolons, you need to have two complete sentences that are separated by a semicolon, but they follow the same idea. This breaks up the sentence, so be careful of that. So this is really interesting. They get the reader hooked. They're like, what mysterious island? What's going on? Okay, watch out for it is a reality. A hard reality realized by many a men who have scourged its scraggly surface. I like that. Over the centuries, and have drilled holes, watch out for the semicolon, in its face. All of them were searching for the clue that would make them rich and fulfill their wildest dreams. Hardly any of these men have found a cent, each coming home with shame, misery, and disappointment etched through their being. They have really great word choice. This pit, discovered by teenagers, excavated by men, and haunted by the dead, will never give up its secrets. Now, this is great, but we don't know what this mysterious island is, and we need a little bit more specific information. They did a good job leaving us with some mystery, some questions we want answered. However, they need to be a little bit more specific. Okay, here's another example. This is talking about the Japanese internment camps, and this uses a part of a fact for the attention grabber. So let's look at this. 2 out of 3 Japanese people who were imprisoned in relocation centers at the time of World War II were United States citizens. Okay, and look at, they put their citation tag and added the page number. So this is great. So this is a really great attention grabber to lead into. But if you look at it, the claim isn't really that strong, and it's a little baby paragraph. So I would say definitely beef that up a little bit. Okay, here's another example, and they use a quote for their attention grabber, which works really well. George Takei once said, "But when we came out of the camp, that's when I first realized that being in the camp, that being Japanese American, was something shameful." Now here they have their citation tag again, which is excellent. They put the period at the end. Now what they need to do, though, is they need to put a comma after said. So they did a great job of introducing the quote, because you have to give a little lead in, or you need to add some of your own wording, because you can't just drop a quote in by itself. So they did a good job. Okay, if you read through the rest of the paragraph, they do have some more specific information. However, their claim needs a little more a stance on it, because what happens when they're talking about the Japanese Americans felt no amount of apology could make up for the suffering, they're talking about all Japanese Americans, which is a generalization, and you want to avoid that. Okay, you always want to avoid generalizations. Okay, Also, this reads mostly like a body paragraph, so even though they have some really great stuff, I would say go back, make it more of a preview. Here's another example, but this one's a literary analysis, so it won't be as persuasive in tone as your persuasive research paper. So here, we're talking about To Kill a Mockingbird and A Lesson Before Dying. So they did a good job in this attention grabber talking about common themes like racism, prejudice, and control are all things that make this world a sinful and awful, saddening place. Now here, they're getting a little bit kind of soapboxy. You want to avoid saying like, we should change the world and all of this. There are bad things in the world, but be careful of making that a little bit too soapboxy, okay? Now they do talk about To Kill a Mockingbird and A Lesson Before Dying. That's awesome. Always include the titles because sometimes people won't know what you're talking about. Always assume that your reader doesn't know anything about your topic and over-explain. So that's good that they drop those in there. They are going to talk about Tom and Jefferson, so they're going to juxtapose those two. Okay, what were they accused of? He wasn't accused of rapping, but he was accused of raping. Okay, they both were accused falsely, and they're similar because how they encounter racism. So I know specifically they're going to look at these two stories, talk about Tom and Jefferson, and look at how they dealt with racism. So throughout that literary analysis, I know exactly what they're going to prove. So as a preview, it works. It needs a little bit more beef. It's a little short, but they did a good job. Now here's another example of an introduction with a literary analysis on A Lesson Before Dying and To Kill a Mockingbird. Okay, there are some grammatical errors like Great Depression needs to be capitalized. There's no hyphen between it, things like that. So watch out for that. But two men were treated unequally in the Great Depression. Okay, their attention grabber may need a little bit more depth. Tom and Jefferson, okay, I know I'm going to learn about Tom and Jefferson. They're the same as far as physical appearance, but Tom was accused of rape while Jefferson was accused of murder. So they both were accused of things, of crimes they didn't commit. So we're going to, again, learn about Tom from To Kill a Mockingbird, which is good, and Jefferson from A Lesson Before Dying. Watch out for your comma errors. They are both similar. They're both different. And they both had unfair trials, and that's the whole point of the paper. Is they're going to juxtapose how those two men dealt with the trials and that they dealt with them differently, although a lot of the setup is the same.